Project Nomads was developed by German studio Radon Labs and published by CDV in 2002. It's a really special game in terms of premise and concept. Flying islands that can be turned into battleships of stone and metal, all this in a post-apocalyptic universe where magic and technology walks hand in hand. Why haven't I heard of this game before? You might be thinking to yourself. You see, Nomads is an abandonware title now that back in its heyday received mixed reviews from many outlets. It was an extremely hyped project that won the Best of the Show of ETSC 2001, back when that existed. It also didn't live up to the aforementioned hype, even though it was a melting pot of different genres and genre conventions, as it combined elements of real-time strategy games, third-person shooters, and adventure games. Only a few games dabbling with odd genre combinations have reached cult status, like Sacrifice or Giant's Citizen Kabuto, but Nomads didn't seem to get there. While it does have a few gameplay videos, you won't find a review of it on YouTube. Unless we take into consideration that almost 3-minute German video that I barely understand because...
It's been a while.
I apologize, it's been a while. It remains a lonely piece of interactive media, floating on the internet all by itself, akin to the rocky islands embedded in its code. It kind of felt like that when I first played it as a wee lad, and it still feels like that even to this day. Nomads was a childhood sweetheart that I found on a disc I got, bundled with a video game magazine. Back in the day, I didn't have internet, so these games and the occasional burnt copies my dad got me were the way to go. I spent a lot of time in the world of Nomads, gazing at its landscapes, traversing through its floating ravines and just trying to make heads or tails of the events unfolding on screen, as I didn't have any sort of knowledge regarding the English language back in the day. Who says I do now? The world of Project Nomads is bleak-looking, lifeless, and therefore lonely. That's how I like post-apocalypse. The fictional planet of Ares has been blown apart. This is the event that the game refers to as the disaster, which turned the planet into an anomaly where pieces of land float above the sea of flames. Which is exactly what you think it is. If you happen to fall from the debris of Ares, you'll burn alive. Not much is known about the planet or the nature of the disaster, other than the fact that the remnants of its architecture and technology were created by the elusive master builders. Some of their handiwork can be found in the form of artifacts that can be turned into different buildings and constructions, which are quite valuable and sought after items by many. Especially by the adventure-seeking nomads working for Travaine, who is the chubby little owner of the grey market. You're one of 3 nomads, who you can pick from in the beginning, on an adventure searching for said artifacts for said chubby man. That's when your aircraft get attacked by the Sentinels, who are basically machines controlled by someone named Seraphim. Not much is known about them, but due to their intervention, your 2 friends get captured and you end up crash landing on a lone island, awaking a master builder in the process who teaches you how to build a battleship out of a small plot of land. Returning to the grey market will kickstart your journey towards saving your friends from the Sentinels' clutches. The master builder, Basalt Face... kind of a dumb name until you look at that beard. It's a dumb name afterwards as well. I understand that facial hair is kinda coarse, but that looks like a giant cloud stitched to his face and my brain just doesn't want to make the connection between the name and it. Dang, also with those tatted looks the man could drop a Santa-inspired rap mixtape. He only needs some face tats, a Supreme hat with some street cred, but
If you say another word, I'll kill you.
Your journey takes you through a wide array of locations, all of them of course being either lonely abandoned pieces of land floating about, or different buildings doing the exact same thing. The story and plan is basically laid out in front of you at the beginning by the master builder, but you will pick up on some disheartening clues rather early on. You gotta save your friends, bucko, and for that you gotta deal some collateral damage. After all, no one else has the ability to travel and shoot stuff. So that's what you're gonna do while looking for your friends. However, the simplicity of the story does not mean that you're gonna be able to follow along easily. You perform tasks because the developers want you to, and while the first third of the game is easy to follow, the middle section and the final third of the game become downright confusing and nonsensical. As you're progressing through the story, things will start happening out of nowhere, characters get introduced, heavily implying that they are an important part of the story, never to be seen again after a few missions. It is clear that the story of this game was cut down on, as there are unused audio files on the CD, and unfortunately this is one of its biggest issues. While its world seems to be immensely interesting, nothing is done with it. Its characters lack basic personality traits and even motivations, which basically means that they don't even qualify as characters. They serve as a means to get exposition and a vague sense of direction in a story that, while has an arc, doesn't have the steps required to make the player invested in it. I'm gonna tell you what I mean real quick, and don't worry, I'm gonna hand out a spoiler warning as well. So the story is a rescue mission, but that doesn't mean that you're not gonna have a few detours. Early on, you discover an island full of hideous bugs on your way to fight the Sentinels. In this here corner of the apocalypse, this unknown island basically cries, "Explore me!" And you'll do so while also picking up bug extermination as a hobby, nabbing cool artifacts in the process. The experience was a bit janky, but I felt like I discovered something special, a place wrought with decay, harboring pieces of an old civilization that no one knows about. The game slowly builds a sense of depth to its post-apocalyptic world, and it is really intriguing, mostly due to the setting. However, just like the story, the atmosphere and the exploratory gameplay that scratches the hardest itch that doesn't seem to go away no matter what I apply on it, progressively dips in quality. After hypothetically stepping on not-so-hypothetical bugs, you'll venture on to assault a Sentinel Island to help out Grey Market Nomads. The attack is successful, and upon returning to the Grey Market, Basaltface unveils his plan about attacking the Ethanor, the citadel of Seraphim, who happens to be the guy who's in charge of the culprits responsible for taking your friends away. At this point, we're like an hour into the game, and Santa Claus has the sheer gusto, bravado, the audacity to tell me that we, more specifically, me, the giant, intimidating, steampunk-looking dude, has to do it. Against all odds, you have to go to Ethanor and destroy the factories producing Sentinel machinery, alone. So you just go there and do it. Yeah, the Sentinels are beaten. Good job, kiddo. We're like an hour and a half into the story. Okay, now what we're gonna do is look for a master builder named Bildan, who not only sent Basaltface into exile, but also holds your friends hostage. This was the point where I sort of got confused for the first time, because good old Rockman said that he was incarcerated by the Sentinels in the beginning. Are the master builders connected to the Sentinels? Then why isn't he? Something is iffy here, but at this point I'm not sure if it's bad writing or an attempt to intentionally confuse the player, because every story beat that we experienced up until this point feels underdeveloped or just straight up unexplored. Little did I know that it's gonna get more confusing, but that's spoiler territory. Your island ran out of fuel, traveler, you're not gonna get through here. If you would like to experience the story yourself, skip to this section of the video, otherwise strap in, because this is gonna be a ride. So the game kinda pulls a twist and shows you that the Sentinels are in fact not done for. You're required to get a level drive from a place called the Island Port that basically enables you to move your island vertically. That's when the Sentinels show up and steal your little abode. Like, literally, they just grab it and take it away. So you're just gonna have to hop on another piece of land sneakily to sneakily sneak into their base of operations. And the emphasis is on sneakily.
Hey! Look at me! Look at me!
You'll end up at the Sentinel base of operations, where you'll be able to take again the red bubblehead Seraphim himself, the leader / lord / creator ? Of the Sentinels. From him, you'll learn about a place called the Vortex Rotor, a big mass of islands held together by generators. The man wants to create a fleet of islands as a last resort to use against the Nomads. Like, if you just kept this a secret and just made it happen without waving your aircraft-shaped dick about, you could have kicked my ass into the Sea of Flames in the early game. Never mind. You'll destroy the generators using a stolen Sentinel aircraft, take back your island and save the island port. You also grab a hold of the level drive and head towards the prison Bildan keeps your friends in. Hold up. What about Seraphim? He'll tell you that you won't get away with sinking his quote-unquote ships and that you'll meet again. The game introduced a bad guy without giving you his motivations, his goals, any sort of quality that would make him interesting. I don't know why you're doing anything, or actually, I don't know what you're doing at all, mister. Also, why do you make your pilots fly through a labyrinthian formation of rocks that they could just fly over? It's your territory and there doesn't seem to be any hazards surrounding the place. The worst aspect about this game's story is that it trips you into thinking that you'll care in the future because Seraphim will be back. He won't be back. You don't believe me, don't you? Well, I'm gonna tell you, he ceases to exist, bucko. That was it. That was the man. I hope you took a good look at him because that was him. Goodbye. As you venture towards Bildan's prison, you'll come across a gate that you have to pass through before continuing to increase altitude. Like you could have just flew over it. Never mind. After passing the gate, you'll stumble upon the Sea of Clouds where an island protrudes out of the clouds. You of course stop there because you need fuel. I know I joked about this before at the spoiler section, but this isn't a gameplay mechanic or a story beat. It's only used here to make you stop for something that you never needed before. And suddenly, bugs. At this point the game partially stripped away the depth of its world for me. When I first stumbled upon the bugs, they felt like something unique, a one-off that not many nomads would have found. It felt special because of that and added an extra layer to this new uncharted world for me. That's not the case though. The game's crawling with bugs. I mean these guys as well. Upon reaching the prison, it turns out that Bildan isn't the bad guy.
A long while ago, he tried to seize power over the scripts. He wanted to conquer the whole world and subject it to his evil will. After a long, arduous struggle, he was exiled forever. If he captures this machine, he will regain his old powers. You must not help him. It is not yet too late. I shall...
So we meet again, Bildan. Now I shall have my revenge for all those many years in exile. Oh, it feels so good to have one's old powers again.
So, Santa uses the bugs to try and take over the world again, also implying that he was responsible for the disaster, I guess. I mean, according to this box art, I'm fighting the things responsible, but who the hell does this cover refer to? The Sentinels or the bugs? Probably the bugs. Also, I rescued my friends from Bildan. Where are they? So he actually held them captive? Where are you? This is the point where the story loses most of its coherence and structure and the devs just keep adding different characters and plot devices as a means to pad out the length of it. At least that's what it feels like when you're all trying to hold the line against the bugs, but suddenly, you realize that there's a master builder named Velkin who could help you out. Again, it comes out of nowhere. You're manning a gun and suddenly, bam, you're sailing out to find her. After everyone agreed that holding the line is top priority because we all will be devoured by the stinky, smelly buggies, Welkin also gives you a narrative slap and points you towards a giant airship known as the Colossus that landed in an area of floating mini-volcanoes back in the good old days of Basalt Face trying for the first time. As a teacher of English and history, I can't tell you how volcanoes work, though I kind of feel like floating mini-volcanoes should not work and might need a bit of extra activity down there in order to, you know, be able to spit giant fireballs of whatever. You of course dig out the Colossus and repair it. Also the Sentinels are helping you out. What? The Colossus is needed for fending off the Skrit hordes while you blow up the City of Machines that Basalt Face uses to keep the Skrit Queen in control. With that you basically destroy him. You level the whole damn thing and the game's over. The Queen escapes and you have to hunt her down. So you do. You also murder her in a boss fight that's kinda weird as it requires you to free an island that's held down by vines, wait for it to pass by the Queen and destroy it above her so it falls on her, casting her into the Sea of Flames. Now the game ends for real as you return to the Grey Market where you all are talking about how your friends might be... What? Also, your character says a few lines in the end.
Who knows? Perhaps there's an adventure or two waiting for me in the Sea of Flame. Farewell.
Farewell, nomad. May you find that which you seek. And remember, you will always be welcome here.
I honestly had a hard time describing this plot to you because even the foundation of it is just somewhat nonsensical and underwritten and just conflicting. The spoiler section in this video was basically made to showcase that. I usually have some sort of criticism to offer here, specifically about events and story beats that are spoiler material, but the problems presented here affect the entire plot. So let's chime back in to bring in the scared nerds. Those frickin' flamingos! They took over the world! You're back! Hey, you missed out on a wide array of fun things. It was kind of a wild ride. The story of Project Nomads is kind of a mess. It lacks cohesion and even structure because of how much of it was cut down on. It kinda takes me back to my childhood, you know, when you're playing with toys and you're making up a story about all these different action figures as you're going, while adding to the plot based on what comes to your mind in that instant. It's not that the story is stream of consciousness either, it just doesn't make sense due to missing parts and conflicting writing. Even the narrator doesn't bring in enough material for you to get a grasp of this world. Personally, I also found his delivery a bit boring, probably because his narration sounds like he's just telling you a bedtime story.
The Athanorm, citadel of Seraphim, lord of the Sentinels. Here in the smoke-filled factories, the mighty air fleet of the Sentinels was being built in preparation for the attack on the Grey Market.
Unfortunately, even the characters feel undercooked. Not only due to the bad writing, but also because of the voice acting and designs. I never played a game before where a character is supposed to embody certain characteristics, but ends up looking and behaving totally different.
Fleet, we're done for. This is all your fault, you wretched master builder.
You see this guy? He's apparently a cutthroat and mean salesman of artifacts. Trevane, buddy, listen. I understand how you're feeling. The showbiz it's terrifying at first. It's absolutely gut-wrenchingly terrifying. It's batshit insane. Especially if you're like a little shy, huggable, adorable bear-looking dude with Wolverine-looking claws that you seem to be incapable of using since you're just too chubby-looking and cute to be actually harmful. But deep down, I know that the little teddy bear is about to break its chains and devour the circus manager whole. I want you to go out there and let that bear out, buddy. I want to see a predator out there growling and turning into a menace, alright? Alright. Action!
Suicide mission. Nomad, this is a job for you. You freed Basalt Face and brought war on us all.
Perfection. Unfortunately, these are all aspects that will progressively get worse and start chipping away from your immersion. Even though the world and the concept is captivating, its barren nature is also the cause of its demise, as it just ends up feeling, again, shallow and underdeveloped. I still like how barren and unique the atmosphere is, and I really hope that a developer will capitalize on this concept and turns Nomads and its legacy into something truly magnificent and interesting. Now that I basically ruined everyone's interest in this game, I think it's time to talk about the gameplay, which is a totally unique beast on its own. As I mentioned before, Nomads plays around with a wide array of different mechanics and genre conventions. You're going to have to build new machinery and maintain your island by repairing damaged equipment, using a resource pool. Kinda like in an RTS game. You also have to man your guns yourself quite a lot, meaning that most of the game is basically an on-rails turret section with the occasional exploratory gameplay or third-person combat. I know that the first part sounds really bad, but it's not. In my opinion, Nomad's mix of different gameplay mechanics actually works really well most of the time. Unfortunately, there are a lot of instances where they feel undercooked. Based on your selected character, your experience will differ. Goliath is a big dude. A hulking slab of meat. His guns are also like him in the sense that they deal hard-hitting projectiles that are rather slow. John and Susie have machine gun turrets that seem to be hit-scan weapons. So here's the thing. I played through the game as Goliath, and also took a gander at Susie and John, and I would consider Goliath to be the optimal character to experience the game with. His turrets feel the best to control, since the other two's weaponry for me were hard on the eyes. For real, this is too much shaking and my eyes were having a bad time. I might lose some gamer cred here, but I just can't handle this much shaking, especially when I have to aim at small objects that I can barely see already. I picked John first, so yeah, the game started out in this department kinda strong, huh? That aside, the gameplay of Project Nomads is unfortunately a mixed bag, though I still had fun with it. Every mission is relatively straightforward and involves artifact collecting and/or destruction of someone's property. Your island has to get across each level using an F tower. Selecting it will let you travel through specific waypoints. Most of your challenge will come from defending yourself while traversing said waypoints, especially early on, when you won't have any sort of aircrafts to use against the enemy. Until then, you're gonna have to shoot at stuff that your island gets close enough to. Your guns can be accessed by clicking on them, or you can just scroll through them using tab. Your island's throbbing mechanical heart is the lighthouse. If that gets destroyed, everything falls apart and it's game over, baby. You also have power plants that generate energy, providing you with the means to repair and build. You can also build silos that increase your energy pool. As you're progressing through the game, you will also unlock a hangar that produces a controllable aircraft. There's also one that builds bombers. Big bombers. Bomber. You can also deactivate hangars so they stop sucking on your energy pool to build artifacts. You can do this by clicking on hangars and selecting the little snooze icon. You can wake them up with the alarm one. You'll need to do this because your planes will inadvertently crash into the scenery, siphoning away your energy in the early game when you would need to build something. The enemy AI does the same with their aircrafts, so that's a plus. Clicking on buildings will also give you the ability to repair them. Sometimes, by the looks of it, all they need is a bit of first aid. Building is extremely straightforward. When you pick up an item, it gets stored in your belt. If you click the left mouse button, you can cycle between your items in your inventory. Clicking on an item will select it and lets you place it on your island. You can choose from different positions, but some of them are reserved for specific buildings, like the middle section for the nav tower or the little side sections for the hangar. When it comes to guns, it's important for them to have the high ground. I usually put 2 in the front, with one of them being on the left and the other being on the right. A few hours later, I also grab a more devastating gun that I usually put in the absolute front. It's not up so high, but I can deal with most of the opposition since they usually come from where your island is pointing towards. Other than that, building placement doesn't seem to matter. It's important to keep an eye on your inventory before going on a little scavenger hunt. You might want to empty it before heading out. You'll even get a safe early on where you can store your artifacts. Heck, there is even an artifact press that lets you combine similar artifacts into a stronger one. One thing to take into consideration in this case is the artifact's color. Blue artifacts can be rebuilt after the enemy levels them, but red ones can't be. Also, combining a level 1 blue gun turret with a level 1 red gun turret will give you a level 2 red gun turret, so keep that in mind when pimping your ride. The game, however, isn't just about your island. Sometimes you gotta do some walking. Just because you can build yourself a floating piece of dirt pile, that doesn't mean that you can go everywhere with it. You think you can get groceries with that? You think you can pull up at your mama's house with that? You dummy. Sometimes you gotta get your head out of the clouds and come down among the common folk. Even if there isn't really a place to come down to, I guess. Exploration isn't really something that you're gonna indulge a lot in while playing the game, but for me these were the most intriguing parts. You will also have to resort to combat in these little segments without the help of your trusty armed landmass. Using battle spells against the enemies is your best bet. These are projectiles that you shoot your adversaries with. The game has auto-aim that will focus these attacks, but unfortunately it's sometimes kinda janky. There is also a time bomb that you can put down next to the structures to get rid of them. While all this sounds fine and dandy, there is a problem. Ground combat will involve bugs. The problem here is that these guys are like basically the world's slowest kamikazes. If you happen to shoot them, they explode the same way, resulting in a toxic cloud of bug sauce that drains your health bar incredibly fast, rendering most of the combat to be nothing but tap tap, stop, go. These clouds can also hurt you through walls. Even in a state when it's almost gone, it can still kill you. Land combat isn't really fun. Even though the game also has a really cool jetpack mechanic hidden in many levels that lets you fly when and wherever you please, the game doesn't provide you many opportunities to use it, aside from some cheeky, otherwise unreachable artifacts. Flying is fun though, and I feel like it should have been utilized a bit more. In the late game there is a sequence where you'll have to leave your island behind and perform a bit of sabotage on some buildings, avoiding gun turrets while also checking back on your island to keep it intact. There are also platforming sections which are rather stiff for a few reasons. The controls were designed in a way that you're not gonna be able to run off your island, and that's much appreciated. The game basically stops you whenever you reach the edge of land. But because of that, you will also get stuck on certain pieces of the environment, with the only escape being the fact that you are indeed capable of jumping. You have 2 jumps, a running one that launches you far away and one that you do from a standstill, which is of course a lot smaller. However, you don't have control over the direction of your jumps. Your character will always jump forward with a really specific amount of force. Sometimes it feels like you're just not gonna make the jump the game requires you to do. There is a general stiffness to jumping and the controls in general that ruins... Who wrote this sentence? There is a stiffness to jumping and the controls in general that ruins the fun of traversing the environment, especially when I get stuck jumping upwards on a slope and the animation keeps triggering. Also, it's really easy to hit something mid-jump and get stuck in a loop of incredibly slow falling. I feel like the game's best moments are when it flips its formula, forcing you to adapt to a new rule set. That's mostly due to how monotonous the island combat can get. Simply because in the quote-unquote tutorial, you're playing the same way as you will on the final level. Most of the mechanics are introduced extremely early on, and there isn't much variety in the game in terms of new weaponry or enemy types. I feel like this is Nomad's biggest problem. Even though it's a rather short game, the lack of variety sort of kills it. I also feel like its mechanics are underdeveloped, lacking depth, and its heavily scripted nature makes it feel even jankier at times. It's still fun to level floating structures and giant bugs though. I had fun playing this game, but unfortunately it wasn't consistent fun, as it was interrupted by a lot of segments that felt like padding, just like in the story department. I'm gonna stop hurting the game now and we'll focus on the positives. Like the audiovisual department. The game was brown before brown became the established color for gritty AAA shooters. Aside from a few samey environments that suffer because of the dominant shades of the color brown, the game looks pretty dang good for 2002. Textures are detailed and distinct. The bugs look especially off-putting to me in a good way. They make my skin crawl, even though I'm a strong, independent man. Heck, based on my sultry caramel voice, you probably assume that I'm 7 foot tall and as wide as a barn door, you know, peak masculinity. But as much as I hate to admit it, and you probably would have never guessed, but I'm none of those things. And I'm terribly afraid of bugs. That's why I didn't buy Cyberpunk at launch. Extremely topical and definitely not late. But yeah, I'm kind of a weakling who's afraid of these dudes. So I usually just wait for my girlfriend to arrive in her combat boots to stomp on him. They also sound yuck. The art style is a really cool mix of steampunk and fantasy, with different characters sporting different looking artifact designs. Goliath and John have a more steampunk industrial look, with the former having utilitarian bulky designs and the latter looking more sophisticated, I guess. Susie is the odd one out, as her designs are more magical and fantasy inspired. Her backpack looks like a bug. There are also cool looking effects and details that make certain objects stand out, like the little red light emitted by my lighthouse as I'm cruising around. I feel like the devs also wanted to attempt a bit of environmental storytelling as well, but didn't go through with it, which is a shame because the wreckage is in the grey market and the ruins peppering the deserted islands could have served up some knowledge dishes for my hungry ass. You could argue though that the barren, empty atmosphere that the game tries to establish is one of its strong suits and serves as the main reason that I return to it. It has a really specific vibe that it captures with its weathered, lonely islands and distant floating rocks that just slowly rock back and forth in the distance. I make so many unintentional bad puns that I should just start counting them, I guess. While the soundtrack doesn't have many songs, the main theme is absolutely incredible. It has a powerful but somewhat distant sounding horn that is really haunting and grabs your attention instantly. The more percussive cuts sound thick and tribal. If the Vikings were robbing Europe blind on floating islands, this would have been their soundtrack. The ambient tracks feel rather simple but complement the atmosphere really well. I really don't have anything bad to say about the music, but I wish there was more of it. Sound effects are chunky and fitting. I love how I can hear the gears working when I start up my island's drive. The thick industrial sounds that your buildings generate are great. There are some weird ones though, like the vroom sound that rears its disgusting head out whenever you take damage. Also, I really wish my jetpack had some cool sounds, because while flying around, there are basically no sounds whatsoever, so I had to make up my own. So this is Project Nomads, an interesting attempt at blending elements of different, not usually mixed genre conventions that in my opinion don't always pan out. Its design feels unfinished and misguided, even though it offers many interesting ideas. Its story falls flat and becomes incoherent due to how much of it is lost to the cutting room floor. Its combat lacks depth or variety that would keep it engaging, and the gameplay loop is only occasionally spiced up with new gameplay additions. The foundation, however, feels really strong, and the game has an atmosphere that might make you stay among all the chaos. While my experience had many instances where I was really not having fun, I'm still glad that I played this game. I was talking to some friends about how much I wasn't enjoying it, but like an hour later something interesting surfaced or a little bit of gameplay subversion happened that made me stay. Here's the deal. I would not urge you to try this game, but if the footage got you interested, it is available for free on my abandonware. I honestly have a hard time describing what aspect of it would make me want to recommend it. I guess I'm just in love with the concept and I just wish for it to become something big and well realized. The atmosphere is unique, and I can see what the developers were trying to achieve by creating this unique post-apocalyptic steampunk world. Ambition is always something that I admire. I'm just terribly sad that my childhood memories of flying through and exploring Ares were tinted by those dang nostalgia goggles. Hey, this is the end of the video and you're still here. I deeply appreciate that. Thank you for watching. Next month I would like to start putting out more content with exams out of my way, so here's to that. If you like the content, please subscribe, leave a comment, follow me on Twitter where I waste people's time. I love you.